The first time my daughter called me trash, she was standing right in front of me. She didn't know I was her mother. To her, I was just the new nanny. I was kneeling on the kitchen floor cleaning spilled juice when she walked in with her friends. Expensive shoes. Perfect hair. The kind of confidence money buys. She stopped when she saw me. Then she wrinkled her nose. "Wow," she said loudly. "My parents hired another one of those sad women." Her friends laughed. I kept my head down. 16 years earlier, I gave birth alone in a tiny hospital room. I didn't even know if my baby was a boy or a girl when they took the child away. My parents told me the baby died. But last year I found the truth hidden in an old record. My baby was alive. A girl. And now she stood 10 feet away from me, mocking me. "Hey," she snapped her fingers. "Nanny, clean that faster. It's disgusting." Her name is Claire. My daughter. The girl my parents sold. I wanted to scream the truth. But I couldn't. Because if I did, I would lose the only chance I had to stay near her. So I stayed quiet. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. The family who took my daughter had no idea their biggest secret was now living inside their house. I was 16 when my parents decided my baby didn't belong to me. My father cared about one thing: reputation. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone. When he found out I was pregnant, he looked at me like I had ruined his entire life. My mother didn't hug me. She didn't ask if I was scared. She just said one sentence: "You've embarrassed this family." They sent me away 3 weeks later. A quiet clinic 2 hours from home. No friends. No phone. No one allowed to visit. When the baby came, I remember screaming for my mom. She never came. I held my baby for less than a minute. A nurse said, "We need to take the child now." I asked if it was a boy or a girl. She didn't answer. My father handed me papers while I was still weak. "Sign these," he said. My hands were shaking. "What are they for?" My mother looked me straight in the eye. The baby didn't make it. I believed them. For 16 years. I believed them. Until last year. When I opened an old adoption file at the county records office where I worked. And saw a name that froze my blood. My baby. Alive. Adopted. By a wealthy couple. The same couple who now employed me as their nanny. I wasn't supposed to get the nanny job. The house alone looked like something from a movie. Huge gates. Cameras everywhere. Marble floors so clean I could see my reflection. People like me didn't work here unless someone powerful approved it. When I sent my application, I expected silence. But 2 weeks later, I got a call. The adoptive mother wanted to meet me. Her name was Margaret Whitmore. The woman who raised my daughter. When she walked into the room, I immediately saw why people feared her. Perfect posture. Cold eyes. She studied me like I was a cheap object she might buy. Or throw away. "You worked in childcare before?" she asked. "Yes." "References?" I handed them over. She barely looked. Then she asked something strange. "You don't have children of your own?" My throat tightened. "No." That was the first lie I told in her house. She nodded slowly. "Good. Women with children get distracted." 5 minutes later, she stood up. "You start Monday." Just like that. I had access to the house where my daughter lived. But as I walked out the door, Margaret said something that made my stomach drop. "There's one rule here, Alice." I turned back. She smiled slightly. "You will never become emotionally attached to my daughter." The first time I saw Claire up close, my heart stopped. She was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone like the world belonged to her. Long brown hair. The same shade as mine. I knew immediately. Before anyone told me. Before I saw the adoption file photo. A mother knows. Margaret introduced me like I was furniture. "This is Alice. She will help around the house." Claire barely looked up. "Whatever." Then she noticed something. My necklace. It had a tiny silver star on it. The only thing I kept from the day I gave birth. Claire frowned. "Why are you wearing that?" I touched it instinctively. Just something I've had a long time. She rolled her eyes. Looks cheap. Margaret laughed softly. You'll learn quickly, Alice. Claire has high standards. Claire smirked. Yeah, especially about the people my parents hire. That was the moment I understood something painful. The girl I spent 16 years crying for had been raised to see people like me as less than human. But what happened next shook me even more. Claire leaned back in her chair and said something that made the room go silent. My mom says my real parents were probably poor losers. Then she looked straight at me. Imagine giving away your own kid. I almost told her the truth that day. When Claire said those words, it felt like someone stabbed my chest. I had dreamed about meeting my daughter for 16 years. In my dreams, she hugged me. In real life, she hated women like me. I forced a smile and continued cleaning the kitchen. But later that night, something happened that made my hands shake. I was putting laundry away when I found an old photo album in the hallway cabinet. Curiosity pulled me in. Inside were pictures of Claire as a baby. Her first birthday. Her first steps. Moments I never got to see. My eyes blurred with tears as I turned the pages. Then I reached the very first photo. Claire as a newborn. And behind her, standing proudly beside Margaret and her husband, were my parents, smiling, like they were part of the adoption celebration. My stomach dropped. They didn't just send me away. They didn't just lie about the baby dying. They were there the day my daughter was handed over. My parents helped give my child away. I closed the album with shaking hands. But before I could leave the room, a voice spoke behind me. You're not supposed to be looking at that. I turned slowly. Claire was standing in the doorway, watching me. Claire didn't look curious. She looked suspicious. Why are you going through our family stuff? She asked. I was cleaning, I said quietly. She crossed her arms. Sure you were. Then she walked over and grabbed the album from my hands. You know what people like you do, she said. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? She flipped through the pages. My mom says sometimes staff steal things. The word steal echoed in my head. I had done nothing wrong. But suddenly Claire raised her voice. Mom. Margaret appeared seconds later. What's going on? Claire pointed at me. She was snooping through our photo albums. Margaret's eyes hardened. Alice. I was putting laundry away, I explained. Claire cut me off. She was holding the album like she was looking for something. Margaret stared at me for a long moment. Then she said something that chilled my blood. Search her bag. I froze. You think I stole something? Margaret's voice was calm. I believe in verification. They searched my bag. Of course, they found nothing. But as Margaret handed it back, she leaned closer and whispered something only I could hear. You seem overly interested in my daughter. I forced myself to stay calm. But inside, a new fear was growing. What if she was starting to suspect something? 2 weeks passed. Every day in that house felt like walking on thin ice. Claire treated me like I was invisible when she wasn't insulting me. Margaret watched me constantly. But the worst moment came late one night. I was cleaning the hallway when I heard voices from Margaret's office. The door was slightly open. Margaret was on the phone. And the name she said made my heart stop. My husband is overreacting, she said calmly. Alice can't possibly know about the arrangement we made with her parents. My parents. My breath caught. Margaret continued. We paid them generously. They were more than willing to solve the problem quietly. The room spun around me. Paid them. My parents didn't just agree to the adoption. They were paid for it. Margaret laughed softly. The girl was a mistake. Everyone benefited from fixing it. I stepped back slowly, trying not to make noise. But the hallway floor creaked. Margaret's voice stopped. Then she said 2 terrifying words. Who's there? I ran back toward the kitchen before she could open the door. But one thought kept repeating in my head. My parents didn't just give my baby away. They sold her. The next morning, Claire humiliated me in front of the entire family. Breakfast was tense. Margaret's husband, Daniel, was reading the newspaper. Claire was on her phone. Then suddenly Claire pushed her glass off the table. Juice spilled everywhere. She looked straight at me. "Nanny," she said coldly. "Clean it." I grabbed a towel. But before I could finish, Claire said something that made Daniel look up. "You know what's funny?" Margaret sighed. "Claire." "No, really," Claire continued. "Imagine being such a failure that the only job you can get is cleaning up after other people's kids." Daniel frowned. "That's enough." Claire laughed. "What? It's true." Then she said something that froze my blood. "My mom told me my real mother was probably some irresponsible teenage girl who didn't want me." Margaret stiffened slightly, but she didn't correct her. Claire shrugged. "Honestly, if she showed up now, I'd probably slam the door in her face." My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the counter. But the worst part came seconds later. Claire turned to me with a mocking smile. "What about you, Alice?" "What? If you had a kid you couldn't keep, would you just give them away?" The room went silent. And for a second, I almost answered honestly. A few days later, something strange happened. Daniel Whitmore started talking to me. Before that, he barely noticed I existed. But one afternoon while Claire was at school, he walked into the kitchen while I was cleaning. "You've worked here a month now," he said. "Yes." "You're very attentive with Claire." I stayed quiet. He leaned against the counter. "She treats you badly." "It's not my place to judge." He studied my face carefully. Then he asked a question that made my pulse spike. "Have we met before?" "No." He nodded slowly. "Strange. You seem familiar." Then he said something even stranger. "You remind me of someone from years ago." My chest tightened. He couldn't know. There was no way. But as he walked away, he added one final sentence. "If Margaret asks, we didn't talk." That night I realized something. Someone in this house was starting to notice me. And I wasn't sure if that would protect me or destroy everything. 2 nights later, I found something that changed everything again. I was organizing storage boxes in the basement when I saw an old folder labeled adoption records. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were copies of documents, legal forms, hospital paperwork, and then a photograph. A picture of me, 16 years old, holding my newborn baby in the hospital bed. My breath stopped. I had never seen that photo before. Someone had taken it without my knowledge. On the back was handwriting. Margaret's handwriting. It said, "Mother before signature." Signature. I flipped through the documents faster. Some papers had my name. But the signature wasn't mine. Someone had forged it. My heart pounded. The adoption paperwork was fake, which meant something terrifying. My daughter may have been taken illegally. But before I could read more, footsteps echoed behind me. I turned slowly. Margaret was standing at the bottom of the stairs, watching me. And she looked furious. Margaret closed the basement door behind her. The sound echoed like a warning. "You're curious," she said calmly. "I was organizing the boxes you asked me to sort." Her eyes flicked to the open folder in my hands. "You found something you shouldn't have." My heart was pounding. But I forced myself to stay calm. "It's just paperwork." Margaret stepped closer. "Those documents are private." "I understand." Then she said something chilling. "You remind me of someone." My stomach twisted. "A girl from years ago," she continued. "A foolish teenager who ruined her life with one mistake." I swallowed. Margaret leaned closer. Fortunately, her parents were smart enough to fix the problem. My hands tightened around the folder. "You should remember something, Alice," she said quietly. "People who work in this house are replaceable." Then she took the folder from my hands. "And people who ask too many questions disappear." She walked away like nothing happened. But when she left, one thought kept repeating in my mind. She wasn't just hiding the truth. She was terrified someone would find it. And I had just proven something to myself. Margaret Whitmore knew exactly who I was. The next morning, Margaret tested me. I knew it the moment I walked into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table waiting for me. "Alice," she said pleasantly. "Yes." She slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was cash. More money than my monthly pay. "What is this?" "A bonus." "For what?" "For loyalty." I didn't touch it. Margaret smiled. "You've seen things in this house that don't concern you." My chest tightened. Every family has private matters. I understood what she was doing. She was buying my silence. "You want me to take the money and forget what I saw." She leaned back. "I want you to remember who you work for." Claire walked into the room right then. "Mom, why is she just standing there?" Margaret smiled coldly. "Because Alice is deciding whether she wants to keep her job." Claire laughed. "That's easy. No one would hire her anyway." I slowly pushed the envelope back across the table. "I'll keep the job," I said quietly. "But I don't need the bonus." Margaret stared at me for a long moment. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Interesting." Because in that moment, I realized she had just decided something about me. And it wasn't good. That night, I drove 2 hours to my parents' house. I hadn't seen them in years. When my mother opened the door, she looked shocked. "Alice." I walked inside without waiting for permission. "We need to talk." My father came into the living room. His expression turned hard the moment he saw me. "What are you doing here?" I placed a copy of the adoption file photo on the table. My mother's face went pale. "You told me my baby died." My father crossed his arms. "That was 16 years ago. You sold her." Silence filled the room. My mother started crying. "We were trying to protect you." "Protect me?" My voice shook. "You took money from a wealthy family and gave them my child." My father finally spoke. "They offered a better life than you ever could. And you forged my signature." My mother whispered something that froze my blood. "We didn't forge it." My heart stopped. "What?" She looked at my father in fear. "There was another paper." My voice dropped. "What paper?" My father's face darkened. "A document you never saw." "What document?" My mother's voice trembled. "The one that says you agreed, before the baby was born." The room spun. Because I had never signed anything like that. Which meant only one thing. Someone had created an entirely different document. One I had never seen. I didn't sleep after leaving my parents' house. My mind kept replaying my mother's words. "A document you never saw." Someone had created a contract saying I agreed to give up my baby before she was born. A lie so big it erased my rights before I even held my child. When I returned to the Whitmore house the next morning, everything felt different. I wasn't just a nanny anymore. I was the only person inside that house who knew the adoption might be fake. Claire was sitting at the kitchen counter eating cereal. She looked at me and frowned. "You look terrible." "Didn't sleep much." She shrugged. "That's what happens when you work too much." But then something unusual happened. She actually studied my face. For a moment, her expression softened. "You look, kind of like someone I know." My heart skipped. "Who?" She shook her head. "No one." Just then Margaret walked in. The moment she saw us talking, her smile disappeared. "Claire, you have school." Claire rolled her eyes and grabbed her bag. As she walked past me, she paused. Then she whispered something quietly. "Why do you always look at me like you're about to cry?" I froze. Because I didn't realize she had noticed. Later that week, Daniel called me into his office. I expected trouble. Instead, he closed the door and lowered his voice. "Alice, how long have you worked with children?" "About 10 years. He nodded slowly. "You're different with Claire." "How?" "You look at her like she matters." I didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair. You know something strange about Claire's adoption? My pulse jumped. What do you mean? Daniel sighed. Margaret handled everything herself. Lawyers, paperwork, hospital arrangements. He stared at the desk. At the time I thought she was just being organized. He looked up again. But recently I started reviewing some financial records. My chest tightened. There were payments made before Claire was born. My hands went cold. Daniel continued. Large payments. He paused. To the girl's parents. The room went silent. He watched my reaction carefully. Alice, he said quietly. Do you know anything about that? I forced myself to stay calm. No. Daniel studied my face one last time. Then he said something that changed everything. I think Margaret lied to me. And if Daniel started digging deeper, the entire truth could explode. The next twist came from Claire. One afternoon she stormed into the kitchen holding a file folder. Mom, she shouted. Margaret rushed in. What's wrong? Claire slammed the papers on the table. I found these in your office. Margaret's face turned pale. Claire, those are private. Claire crossed her arms. Why is there paperwork about my adoption? The room went silent. Margaret forced a smile. Just old legal documents. Claire flipped through them angrily. Then why does it say prenatal agreement? My heart skipped. Margaret grabbed the folder quickly. That's enough. Claire pulled her hand away. No, it's not. She looked confused. It says my biological mother signed something before I was born. Margaret's voice hardened. Yes. Claire frowned. So she planned to give me away. Margaret nodded. Claire laughed bitterly. Wow, that's even worse. She stormed upstairs. Margaret turned slowly toward me. Our eyes met. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Claire had just uncovered the fake contract. But she believed the lie inside it. 2 days later, Daniel called me again. But this time his voice sounded tense. I need your help. That surprised me. With what? I contacted the hospital where Claire was born. My heart started racing. Daniel opened a folder. There's a problem. Inside was a hospital birth record. But the mother's signature line looked strange. Look closely, he said. I leaned forward. The signature was supposed to be mine. But the handwriting didn't match the other signatures in the file. Daniel rubbed his forehead. The hospital says the mother signed consent forms after birth. I whispered, but the contract says before. Exactly. Daniel looked up, which means something was changed. A heavy silence filled the room. Then he said something shocking. I think Margaret forged documents. My pulse pounded. If Daniel exposed that truth, Margaret could lose everything. But before I could speak, the office door suddenly opened. Margaret stood there. And judging by her expression, she had heard enough. Margaret rarely lost control. But that day, I saw the first crack. Daniel, she said calmly. What are you doing? He closed the folder slowly, reviewing paperwork. Margaret's eyes shifted to me. Why is the nanny involved? Daniel stood up. She's not. Alice was leaving. I walked toward the door quickly. But before I stepped out, Margaret said something that froze me. You've been very curious lately, Alice. I forced a neutral expression. I just do my job. Margaret smiled thinly. You should keep it that way. Later that night I overheard a massive argument between Margaret and Daniel. You hid financial transfers from me. Daniel shouted. It was necessary, Margaret replied coldly. You paid her parents. They wanted the problem gone. Silence followed. Then Daniel said something quietly. You bought a child. Margaret's voice turned icy. I gave that girl a better life. Daniel slammed the door. And in that moment something changed in the house. Margaret was no longer fully in control. But that loss of control made her more dangerous than ever. Because people like Margaret Never let their secrets destroy them quietly. Claire stopped insulting me after that. Not completely, but something shifted. One evening she walked into the kitchen while I was cooking. "You've worked here a while now," she said. "Yes." She leaned against the counter. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." She hesitated. "Do you think people can lie about big things?" I kept my voice calm. "What kind of things?" "Like, family stuff." I stayed silent. Claire stared at the floor. "My mom says my birth mother planned to give me away." She looked up. "But something about it feels wrong." My heart pounded. "What makes you think that?" Claire shrugged. "I don't know." Then she said something that hit me deeply. "When you look at me, it feels like you already know me." I forced a smile. "Maybe you just remind me of someone." Claire studied me again. Then she whispered something that shook me. "You have the same eyes as me." My chest tightened. She laughed nervously. "That's weird, right?" I nodded slowly. But inside my mind one thought screamed louder than everything else. Claire was starting to see the truth. A week later, a lawyer arrived at the house. Margaret called everyone into the living room. "This is Mr. Bennett," she said calmly. "He's reviewing some old legal records." Daniel folded his arms. "Because I requested it." Margaret shot him a warning look. The lawyer opened a briefcase. "There are inconsistencies in the adoption documentation." Claire frowned. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Mr. Bennett spoke carefully. "Certain signatures appear questionable." Margaret's voice sharpened. "That's ridiculous." But the lawyer continued. "There may also be missing hospital documentation." Daniel leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "It means we may need to reopen the case." Claire looked stunned. "You mean my adoption?" Mr. Bennett nodded. Margaret's calm mask finally cracked. "That won't be necessary." But Daniel interrupted her. "Oh yes it will." The room filled with tension. And then Mr. Bennett said the words that changed everything. "This situation may involve fraud." Claire looked from her parents to the lawyer. Confused. Scared. And suddenly the truth felt closer than ever. But none of us knew yet just how big the lie really was. I returned to my parents' house again. This time they looked terrified. "You shouldn't be here," my father said. "They're reopening the adoption." My mother gasped. "They can't." "They are." I placed the forged contract on the table. "You said there was another document." My mother began crying. We didn't know what it meant. My father finally spoke. "The lawyer who arranged it told us it was normal." "What lawyer?" "Margaret's lawyer." The room went silent. Then my mother whispered something even worse. "There were other girls." My heart stopped. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Girls sent to that clinic." The air left my lungs. "You mean, other babies?" My father looked away. "Yes." And suddenly the story became bigger than just me. Much bigger. Because if Margaret had done this before, then Claire wasn't the only child taken that way. The truth almost came out by accident. Claire overheard Daniel arguing with Margaret again. "I know about the other payments," he shouted. "There were multiple transfers." Claire stepped into the room. "What payments?" Margaret froze. Daniel looked at her. "You deserve to know the truth." Margaret snapped. "No, she doesn't." Claire's voice shook. "No what?" Daniel spoke slowly. "There are questions about your adoption." Claire stared at him. "You mean, the paperwork?" "Yes." Margaret grabbed Claire's shoulders. "Your father is confused." But Claire pushed her away. Then she turned toward me. Because I was standing in the doorway, watching. And suddenly Claire asked the one question I had feared for 16 years. "Alice, do you know something about this?" The room went silent. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely think. Because if I answered honestly, everything would change. The investigation began 2 weeks later. And it was far bigger than anyone expected. Government investigators arrived with boxes of records. Hospitals. Law firms. Adoption agencies. Everything was under review. One investigator pulled me aside privately. Your name appeared in several documents. My stomach dropped. Why? He opened a file. There were multiple births handled by the same clinic and legal office. My hands trembled. You mean, other girls like me? He nodded. We believe a private adoption network operated for years. My chest tightened. Selling babies. He didn't answer directly, but his silence said everything. Meanwhile, reporters started appearing outside the Whitmore house. Claire watched the news in shock. Mom, what's happening? Margaret said nothing, because the truth was now too big to hide. And it wasn't just Margaret in trouble anymore. The clinic, the lawyers, even the records office. Everything was collapsing. And the investigators were only just beginning. The final truth came out during the official hearing. Margaret sat across the room from me. For the first time, she looked small. The lead investigator spoke clearly. For over a decade, this clinic arranged private adoptions using forged prenatal agreements. Claire looked confused. What does that mean? The investigator continued. In several cases, young mothers were told their babies died or were pressured into signing documents under false conditions. Claire slowly turned toward me. Then the investigator said the sentence that changed her life. In this case, the biological mother never legally agreed to the adoption. Claire's eyes widened. What? He looked directly at me. The mother is present here today. The room fell silent. Claire stared at me, confused, shocked. Then realization slowly spread across her face. No. Her voice trembled. No, that's not possible. I couldn't speak. 16 years of pain sat in my chest. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You're my mother. Margaret lost everything. The investigation proved she had paid for illegal adoptions. The clinic closed. The lawyer lost his license. My parents were exposed for taking money. But the most important moment wasn't the trial. It was the day Claire came to see me. She stood at my apartment door, nervous. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything. She looked down. I was horrible to you. You didn't know. Claire wiped her eyes. For 16 years I thought you didn't want me. I shook my head. I searched for you for years. She stepped forward slowly. Then she hugged me. And for the first time in 16 years, I held my daughter again. Not as a nanny. Not as a stranger. But as her mother. As I held her with teary eyes, I realized something. Truth always finds its way out. You can bury lies for years, but eventually the truth rises. My parents gave my baby away because of their selfish reputation. Children, especially teenagers, should be embraced and not despised or discarded when faced with challenges. A child deserves honesty about where they come from. Wealth and power cannot erase wrongdoing forever. Some of the worst betrayals come from family. Never assume someone's story just by looking at them. The people who seem powerless often hold the truth that changes everything. Real revenge isn't destruction, it's justice and healing. Love can survive even 16 years of lies. If you were Claire, would you forgive your mother for keeping the truth hidden while working as your nanny? And if you were Alice, would you forgive your parents for giving away your baby?